Hi, everyone. Welcome to Classic Album Sundays and Vinyl Me Please, an event celebrating the 50th anniversary of Trojan Records, as well as, yes, give that a hand, as well as the essential record of the month by Vinyl Me Please, which is the Silvertones Silver Bullets. My name is Colleen Cosmo Murphy. Now, to give the album a little bit of context and deeper meaning, we have two legends here with us today. Jazzie B, who is an OBE, who was born to Antiguan parents in Hornsey, London, the ninth child of 10, and some of your siblings also had their own sound systems and were doing sound systems in the 1960s and 70s. In 1977, he started as Ja Rico, and then changed the name in 1982 to Soul to Soul. In 1989, as a group and performance group, they had a debut album, Club Classics Volume 1, which became a #1 UK hit, and also made you an international star. I mean, I was playing that album in Japan when I was working on radio there. Jazzie and Soul to Soul continue to record and to perform worldwide to this day. We also have another legend with us who's a Jamaican toaster, DJ, and producer, Mr. Dennis Alcapone. He's worked with all sorts of producers like Sir Cox and Dodge, Joe Gibb, Prince Buster, Lee Scratch Perry, and Bunny Lee, who also produced his 1971 LP, Guns Don't Argue, on Trojan Records. He also worked with the legendary Duke Reed for the series of singles between 1971 and 1972, including #1 Station, which also features the Silvertones' Keith Coley. As a producer himself, he's worked with such legends as Augustus Pablo, Delroy Wilson, and my favorite Jamaican singer of all time, Dennis Brown. He moved to London in 1974, and since then he's also worked with great producers like Mad Professor and Adrian Sherwood. And just this year, he was bestowed by the Jamaican Prime Minister the Prime Minister's Medal of Appreciation. So our story really starts in Jamaica, in Kingston. And Dennis, I wanted to talk to you about what Kingston was like, and the streets seemed to be filled with music. Can we talk a little bit about the house parties and the sound systems?
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Back then, it was pure nice vibes. You know, you have big sound systems like Sir Coxsone, Daddy, you got Duke Reed, Trojan, King Edward's a giant, Count Bell's the president, loads of sound system, right? And as you know the history of the music, when we leave from the sound system, we went to the discotheques. No, the hi-fi first, and then the discotheque. The sound system consists of 808 tubes. After a while, when the hi-fi come in now, that cut down. Smaller speakers, rounder bass, with the new tubes now, it's called KT88. That was the new tubes, and the bass was round. Top there's the treble speakers, and the bottom is the bass. So when we start out the sound system, we'd start play with the top. And when the music get about in the middle, then we'll turn in the bass, and the people would go wild. Yeah, so yes, it was good vibes, very good vibes, you know, and listening to people like Impressions, Curtis Mayfield. Bob Marley was a great fan of the Impressions. We used to love those songs. Those are the songs that we grew up on, you know, until we find our own music, which is ska. You know, and then we learn to shuffle, dance fast with the ska music, right? And we move on from there to the rocksteady. The rocksteady now is the one that you can really hold a data and rub up a data.
I'm going to rewind a little bit, because the recording industry was still very new as well, because you had Stanley Mata, who was recording Mento, but it was really Sir Cox and Dodd and King Edwards and Prince Buster and also Duke Reed who really started the recording industry in Jamaica. And Duke had his own recording studio that he built above the liquor shop that he owned called Treasure Isle. And I heard that he did carry some guns, and you worked with him, recording with him. What was it like to record with Duke Reed? Were you a bit afraid that he might not like what you were doing and pull out his pistol?
No, because I started working with Duke Reed after that.
Yeah.
Right? He called me as well to the Teach the Children. And I went there and he liked it.
Yeah.
And he gave me a bunch of 5-shilling notes when I finished. Not pound note, not 10-shilling note, 5-shilling, to make it a bungle, to make it look like it's plenty money. And I was very I was very happy.
It's good. It's better than a bullet, right?
Yeah. So anyway, that record, when it came out, it went #1 on both radio stations, RGR and JBC, right? Because we only had 2 radio stations at the time, right? And RGR, some people used to record at RGR too, you know, before even Federal Records, Ken Corey. Some people used to record at RGR, right? Because they had a facility there to record, you know. And then we had Federal Records, which is now Tough Gang. Yeah, Ken Corey. Yes, there was the first big recording company. Everybody recorded. Duke Reed, Prince Buster, Coxsone. That's where they started recording before they got their own studios.
Now, Jazzie, as far as sound systems go, was Duke Reed also an inspiration to you? I mean, for you to start your own sound system?
Well, I guess traditionally all the Jamaican sound systems would have been the forerunners. But what we were doing in the UK was, let's say, a micro version of what was going on in Jamaica. So for us, it was very important that we had our own style and, I guess, hypothetically, our own sound, as it were. So we would have all cut our teeth originally on, you know, Coxsone, Studio One, mainly the producers, you know, Scratch Perry and people like that. You know, scientists and those kind of guys.
Now, Trojan not only imported and licensed records from Jamaican artists here in the UK, but it was also an imprint for UK-based Jamaicans to grow their own brand of reggae music. So you have Bush and Swan Productions, DJ Dice the Boss, and of course Dandy Livingston with Message for You, Rudy. Now, Jazzie, how important was Trojan's role in Britain with the Windrush generation and their protege like yourselves?
Well, I guess the way you would look at something like Trojan now would be like on maybe a good app like Facebook or something like that. It was transporting all the information and all the knowledge, and that's what the message in the music was all about. So us growing up, there was no doubt about it. Trojan was the foundation of it all. Yeah, it's like what you read on the tin. It truly was. So that is where I guess was the start for me listening to music. I have fond memories of buying Nutriment, a drink called Nutriment back in the day. And you remember the old floppy disks that you used to have, and they would have messages on these floppy bits of vinyl and stuff. And I remember one of the first records I bought, being influenced by that, would have been a Trojan record. And as they say, the rest is history, because I did quite seriously get into the whole vibe of listening to the label. And for me, it was our version of like Motown. Yeah. So like there would have been a lot of the house maybe cut or divided, where you have some people listening to that and then some people listening to, you know, the old traditional reggae music coming from, I remember Dr. Bird and Swan and all these other labels, you know, and all of those were benchmarks for us. So some of us didn't even necessarily have a hi-fi, or if you could sneak a way into playing the Blue Spot Gram that your parents had in the front room. I always hear those influences, even listening to, when my parents used to play Calypso from Lord Kitchener all the way through, and wow, they used to have a lot of explicit lyrics even in those days. Never mind in your time when you
and they still do.
The Calypso people, those are the people that used to do the so-called slackness.
Right.
You
Yes.
know,
Yes.
all of that was coming from calypso.
Right.
You know,
okay.
we never used to do that. You know, until later on. I think one of our first slack song was a song called "Push Wood in the Fire" by Jackie Opel, and the radio wouldn't play it.
Right.
And then Eptone's "I Need a Fat Girl,"
Right.
and the radio wouldn't play all those songs. So, "I Need a Fat Girl" compared to what is going on now. It's very tame, you know. You know what I mean?
The message is in the music.
Exactly. Right. And Duke Reed and Coxsone were in the first big sound system, you know. There was sound system before them, but the real big sound system was named Tom the Great Sebastian.
Okay, yeah.
Right. The all of them learned from that sound system. That sound system used to play in a hall named Silver Slipper in Crossroads. Right. When you go to that hall, Duke Vin, you must know of Duke Vin. Duke Vin was the DJ for that sound. They used to call him Shoeshine. Right.
What
So
year
he
are we
also did that.
talking? When are we talking?
We're talking late 50s, 60s. Yeah. Yeah, man. Tom the Great Sebastian. He was the first big sound system. Coxsone and Treasure Isle. Duke Reed learned from that man, King of Birds. Yeah.
Well, back to Trojan. I mean, they were doing so well. They had so many successful artists like Desmond Decker and Bob and Marcia, Jimmy Cliff, the Melodians, the Maytals, successful producers, Duke Reed, Leslie Kong, of course, Lee Scratch Perry with the Upsetters. Return to Django became a hit. I mean, Trojan was doing incredibly well. Now, as a person of Afro-Caribbean descent here in Britain, did that make you really proud? Did that make your parents and your family really proud that Trojan was doing so well?
It was a really strange time for us because I came up in the golden era of the 70s. And I guess that was a transient time. So whoever wasn't militant would have been either at the back of the pub in the snug or selling paraffin, quote unquote. So it was a kind of interesting time in the 70s. We had 3-day week, and that would have been the first time in the 70s I remember the power used to go out. So these were all sort of things in our community that we were used to. And what was interesting about Trojan was that they became that almost like that unspoken institution within the realms of a lot of the West Indians' living rooms and susa parties, we used to call them.
Yeah.
We used to call like blues parties and stuff like that. The susa thing was always part of, you know, our fortunes and us coming up. And some of those parties, I mean, you know, I guess they borrowed the same from the Americans of the rent party. And then for us as younger kids born and raised in Britain, we were watching the original Trojan heads and those guys who were coming out at that time and maybe making notes. And again, going back to the hi-fi end, this is when Class A amplification came out as well. We were juggling between the two, talking about MOSFETs and stuff like that. And yeah, it was a transient time, so everything was changing. I'm talking very, very early 70s now. Before my first launch would have been in 1977, playing my sound for the Queen Silver Jubilee. There was an event that happened across Britain at that time, and we were all having street parties and stuff. So I had my first opportunity to play my sound to a really big audience and being paid for it because it was the street party. And I can remember lining up my Studio One, my it was all a mixture of the variations of different reggae things, like I said, the Dr. Bird albums and stuff like that. And I can remember always doing it in that form because of the production skills. Now that was quite interesting because we were a young youth sound, so we couldn't afford to buy much stuff. So the better the music was produced, sonically, it'd have your sound away. So this was another interesting thing. You could always tell the commercial records by the production.
I mean, it is amazing how well like Trojan was doing. I mean, they would get something mastered over at Pi Studios in Marble Arch, take it over to Dagenham to a pressing plant named Orlake, have it pressed the same day, and then get it into the Music Land shops that evening. Dennis, in Jamaica in the 1960s and early 1970s, were records just flying out of the record shops as well really quickly? Because I've even read something that, you know, Lee Scratch Perry had to release a record and he didn't even have time to finish the jacket.
Well, that's true, because in those days, people didn't have enough money to go around, you know, so you have to make do with what you have. You know, in terms of booking studio time, sometimes they couldn't afford to book more than 2 hours. And they would try to do 10 songs within that 2 hours, you know, just to make it work. Yeah, 1973, when I was coming to England for the first time, Duke Reid gave me an album. I did an album for Duke Reid. And he actually gave me the master tape to take to Trojan for them to release the album. That album was called Soul to Soul, DJ's Choice.
That's right, yeah.
And then I heard you come out with the name Soul to Soul, so I'm wondering if you owe me some royalties.
You know, funny enough, I'm going to put an end to that because the name was actually taken from an event that happened in Ghana. And it was during the early 70s, which was also called Soul to Soul. Okay. Now, when I first went to Jamaica back in the early 80s, and in those days, Don Taylor was my manager. So I got about. And I remember meeting a gentleman.
Is it the same Bob Marley manager?
Yes, the same Don Taylor.
Oh, okay.
So, you know the crowd I would be with, right? And I remember a gentleman, I think 90 was there, and another big producer was there. And a guy came out, literally, looked like he came out of the bush. We were eating Iti apple at the time in a man's garden. And to me, it felt like we was all safe. And a gentleman came out of the bush, right, and he came over on the fence. And he marked, he said, looking for this guy. And it's me looking for, because he had a sound system in Jamaica originally called Soul to Soul. So you see, this name Soul to Soul is one of those things that just rings off of your tongue. You see me?
And that compilation also had yourself and Uroy as well, didn't it? The Soul to Soul DJ's Choice comp on Trojan.
Yeah, there is another thing that I come into this country and discover. There was an album called Version to Version. I had no knowledge of that. That was coupled with me and Uroy. Right, and when I went to Trojan and I saw the album and I asked Lee Gaptal, what's going on with this album? I have no knowledge. I'm not getting any pay for it. You know, so, you know the regular stories that they're going to tell you. Right? I get it from the producer. I get it from that man or that man, you know. So that will just fade out, because up to today I don't get no money from that album. It was coupled with me and Uroy. You know, and I only discovered that when I come to England.
Sadly, that's a story that seems to ring true for a lot of different artists in Jamaica. Why don't we talk a bit about the Silvertones? Now, when this record came out in 1973, the Silvertones Silver Bullets, it had a real duality to it, because you had covers of songs like Benny King's That's When It Hurts, and Souvenirs of Mexico, and The Impressions' He'll Only Hurt You, and also, of course, you can't forget Sugar Sugar by the Archies. But it also had a real kind of glimpse into the future of Jamaican music that was really starting to happen in the 1970s, roots and culture, the Rastafari movement. I wanted to talk about the song Rejoice Jaja Children with you, Jazzie. I know you had a different entryway into the Silvertones, if you want to recap that and just specifically tell us why Rejoice Jaja Children is your favorite song on Silver Bullet.
Well, what happened really with that is the year maybe I discovered myself, quote unquote, would be 1977. So as I said to you, didn't have much money or anything like that. Everything was borrowed. But what I did have is a few records, and those records were put together in financially, alphabetically, sonic order. So there was only 8 of them. It was easy to get around. But I remember a song called Smile by the Silvertones. And when Colleen asked me to do the gig, this is one of the reasons why I'm here today, is because that record, Smile, I must have played that at least 14 times on one session, right? It kind of had a rockers feel there, you know? And within that, what was so great about it really was the vocals. So you have to, you know, that's when you start listening to the Tamlins and you listen, you know, Viceroys and these guys. When you hear the Silvertones and vocally, it sounded so sweet and soulful. You know, that's why that record got played at that street party over and over again. It sounded so good, you know, and it really was one of these records, because I was also fooled by the whole myth of all these songs coming out of Jamaica. And these were wonderful songs. And at that time, I was too young to understand the difference between the beat and the melody. So now when I hear this record and I'm listening through the record, I just trip over on that song, because then that brings me to the mind of all them early, what we used to call rockers in them days.
Well, one last question for you both before we listen to the record. We're talking not only about the Silvertones and Silver Bullets, but also, as we said before, celebrating the 50th anniversary of Trojan Records. What is the legacy of Trojan Records today?
By distributing Jamaican music here, you know, even though a lot of us didn't get paid. But they brought pleasure to the British public. You know, as Jazzie B was saying, that without Trojan and Ireland at the time, you know, British public wouldn't get the real raw Jamaican music. And the sound system, you have to give them praise too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And Jazzie, for you, what is the legacy of Trojan?
I think the legacy of Trojan is, thank God Trojan thought of coming and bringing that music to the UK, because for real, it's almost like one of our versions of a kind of Facebook or Instagram. It's where we got our messages from in the earlies, and traditionally, I mean, I guess they made that move first. So for me personally, they are one of the cornerstones of reggae music, particularly in Europe and for us here in the UK.
Thank you so much for joining us. Please give a hand to Dennis Alcapone and Jazzie B.
Clap yourself.
And now let's have a listen to the Vinyl Me Please essential record of the month, the Silvertones Silver Bullets.